Gaming. It's expensive. Who needs money when you could buy another copy of Pokemon Y? Retro gaming in particular tends to be associated with a high price tag. On the hardware side, getting your hands on a working system in acceptable condition isn't always easy, and then you've got to figure out how you're going to hook it up. If you're like me and need to capture gameplay footage, you'll have to invest in a $150 plus upscaler and expensive high quality cables. That is, assuming your system supports higher quality video output and doesn't need to be sent off for an expensive mod. Once you have all this set up, it's time to start buying games. This is particularly brutal if you live in an area like mine where there are no good options to shop for used games in person and your only real outlet is eBay. How many can you afford now at $20 to $30 a piece? There are other options for original hardware fans, of course, my personal favorites being FPGA consoles, which basically allow companies to manufacture brand new retro consoles complete with HDMI output and all the video settings you might ever need, and flash cartridges, which solve the problem of high game prices and play a critical role in game preservation. Unfortunately though, these also come at a significant premium, so no matter which way you go, you're likely to end up dropping the price of a new next-gen console just for a single system setup, and by now we get into space concerns. We're talking about adding a lot of hardware to not a very large space, and that's without even considering some of the newer systems I'd also love to add hopefully in the near future. Really, it's no wonder why so many people, now more than ever, have turned to emulation for their retro gaming fix. Emulation uses software to approximate hardware, allowing games for older systems to run on pretty much any powerful enough device. While emulators are only able to be as accurate as our knowledge of the original systems allows, emulation for the most part when talking about older, primarily 2D systems has progressed to a point where it performs so accurately that it's allowed on official speedrun leaderboards, pretty much the highest standard you can be held to. Game companies take advantage of this technology all the time. Game compilations have been using emulation for years, and more recently services like Nintendo's Virtual Console and the rise in popularity of micro consoles means official emulation is more accessible than ever. Official emulation definitely has its place. For instance, I always advocate buying game compilations when available to support the creators, but unfortunately many other implementations are severely lacking in features and, more importantly, severely lacking in games. This is where unofficial emulation comes in to pick up the slack. Getting started is as easy and simple as downloading an emulator for your PC and plugging in your favorite controller. For a lot of people, they're perfectly happy with this solution, allowing them to play an entire system's library just like that. Others though, including myself, are more interested in a more consoleized setup, allowing more parity with the official experience. Options exist for this for PC, but that's just not really what I'm going for. I have the most experience with homebrew on systems like the Wii, but generally I've been dissatisfied with video output, controller options, and emulator support and settings. We might discuss some of these other options further someday, but for now I'd like to focus on one device in particular. This is what I feel is probably one of the best solutions for consoleized retro game emulation, the ultimate micro console if you will. What is it? It's a Raspberry Pi Model 4 running RetroPie. Raspberry Pis have obviously been a thing in retro gaming for a long time, but most videos I've seen either act as tutorials for people who already know what they want, or hyper-focus on a specific aspect. Today, I'm going to be talking more about the completed product as a whole, and how I feel as it works as a retro gaming solution. The Raspberry Pi 4 is a single board computer that can be programmed to do all sorts of cool things. It comes as just a bare PCB, although lots of Amazon kits will come with plastic cases to keep everything protected. I opted to go with a bit more premium of an option, the Argon One case by Argon 40. This case offers a significant number of upgrades that really made me fall in love. The Pi's tiny form factor makes it a bit awkward to use as a console. The Argon One rectifies this by using a PCB extender to move all of the side ports to the back, resulting in a much more pleasing, console-like form factor. By cleverly connecting to the PCIO pins with the help of a script, the case is also able to run a fan, as well as provide a power button for a safe shutdown. You can perform a safe shutdown from within the OS, but this saves you having to unplug and replug the system every time you want to turn it on. I think this is just about the perfect case for something like this. I really like the vibe of building a mini console, but for every system, and I feel like the Argon One sells that quite well. Plus, the aluminum construction makes it feel more premium than at least half the other consoles I own. There are a lot of other options offering similar features though if it's not quite your style, so do a little bit of shopping and I'm sure you'll find something that you love. A few more essentials before we get started. If the listing for your case doesn't explicitly state it comes with a power supply, you'll need to provide one yourself. Some case manufacturers sell their own, or you can pick up the official Raspberry Pi branded one pretty cheaply. The Pi 4 outputs micro HDMI, so you'll need a way to convert it to use with most displays. Some bundles come with cheap adapters or dongles, but if you want the cleanest look and feel, I would recommend grabbing a dedicated cable, which you can get for a similar price. Finally, you'll need to grab a micro SD card to load up RetroPie. I went with a 32 gig model that should be enough for most people. Setting up RetroPie isn't difficult, but you will need to be fairly computer literate and skillful at following tutorials and troubleshooting with the help of the internet. There are a mountain of excellent videos walking you through each and every step, so just take your time and you should be alright. You will need access to a computer with an SD card reader, as well as a USB keyboard to plug into the Pi for some of the initial one-time setup steps. Finally, we can take a look at RetroPie as an experience. RetroPie comes pre-installed with a ton of emulators. Simply add your ROMs to the correct system folder and bam, a new console shows up on the home screen. From here, you'll find a list of installed games that you can load up and play just like that. The games run pretty much perfectly. The emulation is based on RetroArch, and through my entire time with the system, a few weeks, I've yet to run into a single hitch in the gameplay. The Pi 4 is massive overkill for early, primarily 2D consoles, so if you're expecting games like Star Fox to give it issues, stop. The same could be said of tons of devices though. The real draw of RetroPie is the presentation and the settings. RetroPie has been in development for about 8 years now and is extremely well supported to this day, giving it a very professional feel to use that you would expect out of a retail product. For me though, easily one of the most important features available is the built-in scraper. It's likely if you want to load up more than 4 games onto your Pi, the titles are going to look something like this. Parentheses, region information, it makes me sick to my stomach. Most of the time, there would be little you could do about this, as manually renaming every ROM would be entirely impractical unless you had very few games. However, through the power of scraping, your Pi is able to connect to the internet and use metadata to automatically rename every game, as well as pull down ratings, descriptions, player counts, and even box art. You can configure how much of this you want to display, but after a successful scrape, your RetroPie is just about guaranteed to look a lot cleaner. Hopping back into games, holding your selected hotkey button and X will bring up an in-game menu. From here, you can access just about everything you might want or need for playing games. A reset button, save states complete with an undo load state button, great for preventing you from accidentally losing all of your progress in certain games with a single button press, rewind, screenshots, and even recording and streaming options, which I wouldn't even begin to know how to use. Move a layer deeper, and you're into video settings. Video settings are one of the frequent points of friction for me when it comes to emulators, almost always lacking or hard to use. In RetroPie though, these settings are expansive and intuitive. You can fill the screen however you want, but there are aspect ratio buttons and integer scale options as well. Likely more important than that though are the slew of console-specific settings available. At this point, NES palette settings are pretty much standard, but I've always had a hard time with original Game Boy games. You never seem to have access to the full range of color options that should be universal, but to my absolute elation, they're all present here. Every Game Boy Color palette, every Super Game Boy palette, even Super Game Boy Enhanced palettes for the games that support them, meaning you can finally play Pokemon in full color. The Master System also gets some much needed attention. Most games for the console don't fill a 240p frame, and they fill this extra space with solid colored borders that look alright on CRTs, but are extremely annoying on modern displays. The size of these borders change from game to game and even between scenes in the same game, which makes them difficult if not impossible to remove with traditional cropping. Thankfully, RetroPie has your back, allowing you to automatically remove borders from all Master System games and then display them at either their original size or fill the screen. Interestingly, a lot of these games display at much wider aspect ratios when not accounting for the borders, some even being wider than 16:9 and having letterboxing at the top and bottom of the screen. Remember though, these aren't being stretched or distorted, they're just no longer being arbitrarily letterboxed to fit a 4:3 frame. If you aren't into it though, you can stretch or size the screen pretty much however you want, or just play with the borders on if they don't bother you. You can also choose to display just left and right, or just top and bottom borders, if you prefer that for whatever reason. What about your options for controlling these games though? After all, not being able to control a game the way you want could be a deal breaker, no matter how good the other aspects are. Thankfully, your options for controlling games on the Pi are basically limitless. Want to connect up your Switch Pro controller via Bluetooth? Go ahead. Want to play Home Alone 2 for the NES with your Xbox 360 Afterglow controller? The Pi is the system for you. Want to use a Wiimote for some reason? Yeah, that works. Just about anything you can connect to a PC, you can connect to the Pi in pretty much the same way. PlayStation controllers are probably your best bet if you just want one dedicated controller that can do everything. The layout is perfect for 2D games, they have all the buttons you'll need, and a large number of people probably have an extra DualShock 4 controller just laying around begging to be played with. Alternatively, if you're planning to go out and buy a controller specifically for use with the Pi, might I suggest the SN30 Pro Plus by 8BitDo. Primarily advertised for use with the Switch and PCs, this controller has all the same buttons as a DualShock 4, but is heavily stylized after a Super Nintendo controller. It feels great in the hands, and the D-pad is awesome too, probably a bit more appropriate for the types of games you might be playing than a PlayStation style one. The buttons on this model match those of an SNES controller, 2 concave and 2 convex, although they also offer a model with 2 convex buttons and one with a Game Boy style D-pad. This thing will probably get a dedicated video at some point, so I won't drone on, but it's actually probably the same price or cheaper as a new modern controller, and I think it's an amazing buy for use with RetroPie. If you're on a tight budget, you could always pick up some $5 USB gamepads from Amazon. I'd say you get what you pay for with these. They aren't awful though, if you aren't picky, so if that's what you want to do, knock yourself out. For me though, possibly the #1 appeal of RetroPie was the slew of high-quality, modern, wireless versions of classic pads available for sale. Nintendo currently sells an official wireless Super Nintendo controller for use with the Switch, and I want one of these things probably more than I should. Unfortunately though, they aren't easy to get your hands on. They're only sold through Nintendo's website exclusively to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, and even as a member, I've checked on this page every day since sometime in September hoping to pick one up, yet it hasn't been in stock a single time. Maybe someday I'll be able to buy one, but for now the SN30 Pro Plus serves faithfully as my go-to controller for all Nintendo platforms on the Pi. I would imagine a lot of people are going to be interested in 6-button controllers though, and that's where Retrobit comes in with their officially licensed 2.4 GHz Sega Genesis pad. I love this controller. It was actually made with the original mold Sega used to produce the Genesis controller back in the 90s, and everything about it feels amazing. It has a few extra non-intrusive buttons for maximum compatibility, and given how many Sega systems the Genesis was the preferred official input method for, this is a great buy for fans of the company. It is a bit of a premium option though at $35, so you might want to check out 8BitDo's really popular wireless take on the same design, or the USB model of the Retrobit pad if you want to stay on speaking terms with your wallet. Finally, I was really excited to get my hands on this wireless PC Engine controller, once again by 8BitDo. It looks and feels really nice, but for some reason, despite working fine on my Switch, the home button registers the exact same as the select button in RetroPie. This, and the lack of alternative buttons for important hotkeys like opening the menu, led to me having a super frustrating time trying to get this one configured. Seems really solid though. If I can ever get the software side of things worked out, it'll probably get a lot of use. On the software side of input though, options are just as extensive as I've come to expect. You can map your controllers however you like, both at the system level and at the emulator level, allowing you to attune your controls optimally for each console. What's really amazing though is that you can actually save remap files on a game-by-game basis. This is obviously great if you just can't tolerate some earlier games that might use a non-standard control scheme, like up to jump, or maybe for games on systems like the PC Engine where often used actions might have been mapped as select or something due to lack of available buttons. No longer do you have to fiddle about in the settings every time you want to play or switch between games, just set it once and never think about it again. Something else you might not have thought of yet but that has certainly made my life much easier is the potential application for RPGs on systems with only 2 face buttons. If you aren't a sociopath, for 99% of games on these consoles, you'll want B mapped to Y and A mapped to B, so your thumb can rest comfortably across them like it would for most modern games. For RPGs though, where most of what you're doing is menu navigation, this doesn't feel natural at all. I want A and B on A and B. So just set an individual remap file when you start one of these games, and you're good to go. Finally, I think I want to talk a little bit more about storage. With modern consoles, you're constantly having to worry about space, uninstalling old games to make room for large updates, or spending hundreds of dollars to upgrade the storage on your console. I'm sure then that quite a few of you are wondering just how far that little 32GB microSD card will carry you, and that kinda depends on what you want to do. For starters, the RetroPie OS takes up about 8 gigs, leaving 24 left for games on a 32GB card. Fortunately though, for those of you who don't know, early cartridge-based games are tiny, with individual games usually being measured in kilobytes, and entire system libraries being measured in megabytes. For further context, my entire ROMs folder containing full libraries of every game for about 16 systems as of now is a little under 6 gigs. There are some systems I'm missing, of course, most of them being very early pre-NES consoles that should have zero impact on file size. Notably, I've yet to add the full Neo Geo library, which should come to about 5 extra gigs, but so far we're doing really well. Things start to change though when we begin to think about disc-based media. A couple of 16-bit systems later on in their lives received add-ons that allowed them to play games from CDs, notably the Genesis and the PC Engine / TurboGrafx 16. The larger storage sizes afforded by discs allowed for some pretty awesome feats back in the day: full motion video, and everybody's favorite, CD quality audio. These games look and sound perfect on the Pi, but at the cost of comparatively monstrous file sizes, with individual titles usually averaging somewhere around half a gig a pop. Fortunately though, there's no real reason you need all too many of these. Full libraries of these games would just be unnecessary. Lots of them never got English releases, rendering them unplayable, and lots more you really wouldn't want to play. Nonetheless, these make the storage situation a bit less comfortable, which is one of the reasons why I opted to pick up this, a tiny 128GB USB flash drive for about $20. I actually don't even have any games on my SD card. This just fits unobtrusively in the back of the Pi and allows for faster loading over USB 3, as well as potentially more options when it comes to messing around with different RetroPie images or simply SD cards failing on you. The stuff we talked about today barely even scratches the surface when it comes to what the Pi can do. The Pi 4 is a shockingly powerful gaming machine and is actually capable of emulating much later systems like the PS1, PSP, and even the Dreamcast surprisingly well with a little overclocking. This doesn't really interest me personally, and covering it in this video would have been a much bigger undertaking than I'm prepared for in one go. Maybe if this video does well, I'll do a follow-up. It also kind of goes without saying that the file sizes on these systems can get astronomical, so you might want to look into some cases with built-in hard drive bays or just straight up external drives. All in all, I'm just so happy with this little thing. This is honestly the first time I've ever seen an emulation experience that feels like you aren't missing out on the gameplay end as compared to more expensive original hardware solutions. I would still love at some point to own either original consoles or FPGA solutions for most of these systems. I'm big into collecting hardware, and for me there's just no beating the real thing. However, that day is still a long way off, and until then, I think RetroPie will serve me quite nicely. Plus, I'm sure it'll still have a place emulating systems like the obscure Japanese-only handheld WonderSwan and other such oddities with worthwhile libraries. To reiterate, the Raspberry Pi isn't even close to the only solution like this for playing retro games, and RetroPie isn't even the only retro gaming focused front end for the Pi. This video isn't here to tell you what you should or shouldn't buy, but rather just to let you know what's possible and maybe give you a jumping off point for your own research. Nonetheless, I'll be sure to link any of the stuff I used in my personal build down in the description below, along with the RetroPie website. I've wanted to do a video like this for forever, but it's obviously very experimental for me, so I'm not really sure what the level of interest is in this style or potential future videos covering other topics in the same way. That's why if you did enjoy this video, or if you hated it, I would love if you could leave a comment and let me know. Detest typing but still have an undying need to have your opinion heard? Boy, do I have a set of buttons for you. Additionally, you could always yell at me on any of my social media. I'll link down below right next to any of the music used in this video. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, or check out some of my other content if you're new here. If you made it to the end, I salute you. I hope to see you next week, and as always, thanks for watching.